Thank you. Welcome to the Golden Pathway Zoom seminars, where we make a connection between the 7 major world religions and the teachings of the Ascended Masters. We have been doing these seminars for 5 or 6 years and have covered topics as different as relationships, abundance, healing your psychology, and this year our focus is on practicing spirituality. How do we turn the teachings from something we know into something we do and something that we are? So unseeing today is our topic, and it's not an excuse to ignore reality or to be unaware of what's going on in the world. We are trying at this moment to hold the Immaculate Concept for Jesus as he grew up. It was a gift that he had and she had, and we want to learn that gift. And I have not the right. I've got several different copies here of the invitation. So let me just tell you about Patrick, who is Reverend Danahy. He found the teachings of the Ascended Masters in 71 and joined the Summit Lighthouse in 72. He's commissioned as a lay minister in 73. He's opened and served on several new teaching centers for the organization. And in 94, he was ordained and later helped develop curriculum and instructed aspirants in the ministerial training program. So Reverend Danahy has a BS in psychology. He's an astrologer, a licensed hearing specialist, and a ministerial counselor. He lives in Bozeman, Montana with his wife, Ann, and we are very happy to have you with us today. Patrick, welcome.
Well, thank you, Patricia. And thanks to all of you whom I can see. And thanks to our beloved Guru who got us the opportunity to start on the path and to continue. Well, we were talking about vision, and we know that without vision, the people perish. Now, the problem that many of us have is that if we look at the world, it appears as if the world is perishing already and that we're next. So the question then is how dynamic is our vision, or how passive? We're going to hear a little quote from Saint Germain a little bit later, about 6 or 7 minutes. And I think it's outside of, well, actually, there's a little bit in that quote where he says that the people of the world cannot necessarily be relied upon to build a better world because all they do is read the newspaper. So if we're reading the newspaper or the internet or whatever it is that we're using, the technology varies, but the information sources often don't. So it becomes incumbent upon us to separate our mind and our consciousness out from the mass mind of the world, and then to find our connection to the mind of Christ and the mind of God. Now that seems sometimes distant, but I remember a dictation from our beloved Hercules who said, "You do not have the mind of Christ and the mind of God. You are the mind of Christ and the mind of God." In the chapter on discipleship in the Corona class lessons, a collection of essays from Kuthumi and Beloved Jesus, we're taught, whatever the appearance, blessed ones, through affirming your unlimited attunement with God, you are able to rise above it. You're able to rise above the appearances. You're able to rise above what you see. It ought to be known that merely thinking upon God is a tangible link connecting the world of the disciple directly with the Father of all. Now, when we're talking about connecting the world of the disciple, we're talking not only about our inner world, but our outer world. And our life as an initiate is a life that is both objective and subjective. The difference is that the path of spiritual attainment includes God mastery, Christ mastery, over the inner world. And as this happens, then there are coordinates with the way the inner world and the outer world work together. Some people call it serendipity, some people synchronicity, some people magic. But the fact of the matter is that what we see and what we accept and what we harbor or give place to, or if we want to go OCD about it, when we continually revolve in our world, is by choice. Now, we can't control what we see entirely. But as we learn to control how we react to that, we will actually be able to refine the space between appearance or stimulus and reaction. And that space becomes, with mastery, you can think of it either as being shrunk or as being expanded. But the point is that our ability to interact with what we see and to alter what it is that we receive is a natural process that most people ignore, but we can apply our conscious attention to and develop. So we experience things, we see things, we hear things, we smell things, all of the five senses. And it's an interesting thing that we could sometimes have a transcendent experience. Let's say we're in a class at a church, or that we're listening to a dictation, we're in a meditation, we're applying ourselves, giving ourselves space to tune into the presence of the living God, and we can feel ourselves transported. And then we get to come back. And when we come back, it may be that the reality that we're stuck with here seems to challenge the memory of the reality that we had. And so we can end up being confused and ask, what is real? If the world is crazy, if I don't join it, am I sane or nuts? If I choose not to join it, and the mass mind is going off in a strange direction, an unholy direction, a chaotic expression, how shall I hold my peace and still be alert? I need thee every hour, mighty I am presence, beloved Elohim, peace, shew forth thy light. The affirmation, which is not just, I remember Mark told me once very early when I got into the teachings, and he asked me once, how are you doing? And I said, oh, everything's just fine, Mark. And he said, well, saying doesn't make it so. So there's a difference between just saying it, and tuning into the heart, stilling the mind, stilling the outer, and then making your declaration of reality that you are accepting, that you are projecting, that you are creating, that you are magnetizing. So we have this problem between what our senses give us and what we would like to be. Now, we can live in a dream world, and that's not particularly helpful either. But it's useful to not have nightmares. So we can learn how to have more mastery, living and sleeping, awake and asleep. We can learn to have more mastery as we leave our body at night and go off into the retreats. We ask Archangel Michael to help us to get there. And then we can learn, as Lady Master Leto teaches us in the 7th Keeper's lesson, to remember what we learned in the retreats, what we experienced in the retreats, to bring that back with us. And then we have an internal reality. And this can be coordinated with what we're studying in the Keepers of the Flame lessons or other works that Brotherhood has given us. And as we study the teachings and we apply ourselves both when we're awake and when we're off to the retreats at night, then the world of the spiritual world and the physical world becomes coordinated, becomes integrated, becomes one. And yet we can still have the news reports of a riot here, of the shaking of swords and sabers, of explosions, of difficulties, of illnesses, etc. And so then there comes a question of our own force field. And how are we seeing our own force field? Jesus tells us in this lesson 27 in the Corona class lessons, your physical senses ought not to be desecrated by your holding in mind the idea that because you are physical and outer in nature, that these perceptions are necessarily sensuous. Such old-fashioned ideas only give power to evil. Quite the reverse. Your senses, as instruments of your Christ nature, have the inherent power to discern both good and evil, and therefore to protect you by foreknowledge from the wiles of the evil one. This discernment serves as a protection to your vision of God as the all-good, that it might not be marred. And yet I am declaring that in order to drink the cup of discipleship, you must be constantly aware that all things that come from above, your higher consciousness, are good and pure, so long as they are immaculately sustained as divine ideas or chalices for divine ideas. Hence, the instruments of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling are hallowed, are made holy, when you use them to take delight in the great cosmic law. So, some people say that life consists of two basic motivations. One is to approach towards the good and the pleasurable and to avoid the evil and the uncomfortable or painful. And I suppose there's some truth to that. But even if that is a basic division of human experience and motivation, we can also choose to spend a little more time on the inner. And when we draw down our tube of light, are we not drawing the inner right down into the physical world? Are we not drawing the spiritual world right here? Are we not drawing our own I am presence, Christ self, our causal body, and making that available to us physically here? Indeed, that's what it's all about. It's here in the physical plane that we are for a period of time to learn how to navigate our spiritual selves. If we only allow our vision or our hearing and so forth to take what we get based on what the world dishes out, it's going to be a fairly unhappy and unmasterful life. But we can take what we receive and learn to work with it. Part of it is just surviving. Part of it is learning to thrive, to get along in the world. But also, while we're here, we can remember about our inner world, our spiritual world. And so we then learn in the alchemy of Saint Germain to create the cloud. The cloud at first is undifferentiated white light. It establishes a force field in and around us. And then we can apply to that our creative vision to create first on the inner and then on the outer the circumstances that we desire. This can be just a matter of wishful thinking, but with some mastery, with some God control, with some continued application, it moves from the realm of sweet dreams and good intentions to the environment that we live in and that other people can share in. So we can be the co-creator of our universe. In a certain sense, we are, because the universe we live in is the universe that we karmically inherited, and we make our own karma. So we learn how to be a little tougher so that we don't take other people's impressions and projections and then allow them in our world. We don't have to do that. They can come in and they can make us, we can, people send us things, and we don't have to be happy with every gift or projectile. But we can decide what we're going to keep. And if we get hit and there's a kind of a wound in our psyche or our gut, then we simply stop, still the outer, take a few deep breaths, maybe do the count to 9 decree. And then we start to rebuild. And we put on our armor. And when we draw down our tube of light, we remember the full armor of the Lord. And these projectiles crisscrossing across the face of the earth, through the fire and the air and the water and the earth. These crisscrossing elements need not penetrate the tube of light. And even if we become aware of them, we do not have to let them in, and we do not have to let them upset our equilibrium. And the nice thing, I like to think of this in terms of a baby who's having a nightmare, and the mother just comes and picks the baby up and rocks it, and all of a sudden that nightmare is a long, long ways away. And when we carry that force field of a stronger and a more dynamic peace, an understanding of the love of God, and we carry that with us, then we can learn to share that. And when people send us projectiles, we can reject it and send it back, but we can send it back with love. When I was in Vietnam during the Second Tet Offensive, it was kind of a long night of battle, and for me, it wasn't like the movies. It wasn't really that dramatic, but we were a lot of us along a certain defense perimeter, and we were looking for trouble because we'd gotten intelligence that there were Viet Cong and so forth out in the field. We couldn't see a thing. It was totally dark. We had nighttime goggles, and so we could see little outlines of trees and so forth, but we couldn't see anything to really shoot at. So we were shooting it just in the dark. And next to me was a machine gun, and they switched their ammo, and about every, I'm not sure what it was, maybe fifth or maybe third bullet, or maybe 8 even, I don't know. But every once in a while, one of the bullets was a tracer. So it sent out a brilliant, bright reddish light that went out in a beautiful arc out into the dark. But of course, that arc could be followed back, which meant that you became very vulnerable by that. So it was a mistake. So there was a lot of cursing and so forth, and they switched out the ammo line for a straight ammo, and then they continued their shooting. And I became aware just during those few seconds there how not only was I ignorantly in the dark, but so also most likely were the enemy, to the degree they were even there. But what I came to understand in those few seconds is that in the same way that Arjuna was taught by Krishna how to go ahead and fight the war that his karmic circumstances placed him in, the important thing was not to send out hatred with the bullet, because that could be traced back and make you vulnerable. So as we take our little steps forward, learning how to not send out negative energy, not to see the worst in the people that you meet, not to expect the worst, but to hold that immaculate concept and the expectation of the best at the same time that you stay alert in case something else tries to come in. We begin to add more to the positive creation. And this is taking our power of vision, our power of hearing, our power of feeling, and using that to send out the kind of energy that we would like to get back. Jesus tells us the purity of heart creates a vehicle through which the radiance of divine love manifests as a floral perfume to the outer self and as a blessing to the inner man. Your feelings, blessed ones, especially the sense of touch, are your means of communication with the outer matter density, preparing you for contact with spirit's intensity. It should always be realized that all substance is divine and has a core of pure light. This fact will enable you to bless all that you touch with a God radiance which shines forth from within your developing heart flame. The realization that you already possess spiritual senses and that these manifest through the physical senses is a key to raising the physical senses into their divine intended functions. Exalt all vision, hearing, tasting, smelling, and feeling as an adjunct to your victorious discipleship. So I think that there's oftentimes a tendency, even in the old Gnostic tradition, there were two things going on. One is that you could have a direct perception and understanding of God and spirit and the spiritual reality. The other was that the world, and the extreme version of that Gnostic tradition, that the world itself was evil and a problem. And so what Jesus is telling us here, and what the masters have affirmed, is that we have to think of the material world, including our senses, not as an invitation to evil, not as a temptation to the way of the world, but rather as an experience for our divine understanding to navigate the world. And as we're navigating this world, we learn to balance our karma, because the karma will come. And as we balance that, in the process of balancing the past karma, our mastery increases, our God control increases, and we end up being able to flood the world with more love, wisdom, and power coming from our heart, to flood the world with good feelings of love and appreciation. I'm sometimes amazed when I find myself, if I've done my decrees in the morning and so forth, and kind of set myself up for the way I want the day to go. I'm sometimes amazed at how readily people I don't know are willing to cooperate and help me to experience that love. Complete strangers. And sometimes when I'm sending out that love and that joy that simply comes from remembering that God is alive here in our world, other people are happy to join into that, even though they may not have been intending that or aware of that. before they ran into the force field of our interaction. Now, whenever I can, I enjoy taking a teaching from the opening of the seventh seal. So I'm looking at page 276 here in the paperback version. So we're starting at 275. In the hour when Jesus Christ delivered unto the other 70 the power of the mother flame to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all power of the enemy, he revealed the mystery of the science of the fifth ray of the all-seeing eye of God. Now, the science of the fifth ray of the all-seeing eye of God is a science of personal Christhood. It's the point of precipitation. It occurs on the 3 o'clock line, the point of Christ and the point of the Christ mind in the sphere of matter, in the mother sphere. There's also the spiritual sphere. So, and Sana Kumara sent St. Patrick and Hilarion to assist us to pass our fifth ray tests, the tests of the green ray, so when Jesus told the other 70, he revealed the mystery of the science of the fifth ray of the all-seeing eye of God. In Matthew 11:27-29, we read, all things are delivered to me of my Father, and no man knoweth who the Son is, but the Father, and who the Father is, but the Son, and he to whom the Son will reveal the Father. And then Jesus turned to his disciples and said to them privately, blessed are the eyes which see the things that you see. For I tell you that many prophets and kings have desired to see those things which you see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which you hear, and have not heard them. With this teaching, Jesus, whose power derived from his inner understanding, his self-realized Father and Son within him, explained that all things, all substance, energy, and manifestation of both good and evil, are delivered unto him and subject unto him by the presence of the Father, individualized within him as the I am that I am. Now, you'll hear a little bit later from our beloved Saint Germain that the kinds of teachings that we have received are so advanced compared to the mind of the world that it makes us almost a parliamenter in determining the way of the world. So in the same way that we can learn to have a concentrated, consecrated consciousness that will develop our inner world and our outer world as we advance on the path of alchemy and mastery, that same power of the presence, that same power of the Father, the I am that I am, that same power of the Christ that is inherent in every son and daughter of God, is the same Christ and the same God power in the individualized in you, in me, in the sons and daughters of God, the children of the light, that can dictate not only our inner world and our immediate environment, but also the way of the world at large. So I think it's important when we hear the reports from our friends sometimes, or about who this particular political candidate is, or should or shouldn't be, or whatever. Or when we hear about the rattling of the swords with Russia and Ukraine and China, etc., and we have people making decisions that appear to be not to the benefit of the sons and daughters of God and the children of the light, to remember that the living God can operate through your spoken word. So when this energy comes in that has a negative, then let there be the judgment. Let there be the declaration of the world that you want to live in. Let there be the declaration of the alchemy that you would like to express. And that decision, that alchemy, that statement comes not only with the words, but it comes with the picture. What would that look like, this world that you would like to live in? And the God of peace shall bruise Satan under your feet shortly. This is 1 Romans 16:20. So this God of peace who was with Paul is the sixth of the seven holy Kumaras who sponsor initiates on the sixth ray under Jesus Christ to give dominion unto his disciples over the desire body and the personal and planetary emotions of the solar plexus. Personal and planetary. So there's two ways to think about that. One is that even if the world is agitated or gone mad, that doesn't mean that it has to penetrate through into your inner world. Just like the baby's nightmare, the cries of the baby may upset mother, but the mother takes the baby up. And you can learn to hold the whole world in your heart. And then you can rock that baby and calm the child and be the adult, the master becoming, and know that the world is blessed because the waters of the river of life that flow through you will make a difference, because that water is the flow of the consciousness and the power of the living God. It is the power of the I am that I am. It is a power brought down through the Christ into the planes of the physical, into the soul development, into the soul awareness. And if it seems like it's too big and too tough for right now, then remember to be patient. Just like the child will grow up and the child will learn to overcome the susceptibility to the nightmare and so forth and so on, or the colic or whatever it is that's upsetting the system. And so we ourselves have to be patient with ourselves, because there is a difference between where we are and how we would like to be. But if we take how we would like to be and place it solidly in the heart of the Father, in the heart of the presence, then as we came from the presence and as we are destined to return to the presence, we shall learn to live and to walk and to be in the presence. Santa Kumara tells us that in the beginning with Adam and Eve, that the problem with the test that needed to be passed that was not passed, even though there's different ways to analyze it, that it basically came down to this: that the word of the guru, the presence of the guru, the direction of the guru was not enough. And so in this part of the book, he reminds us, there is an ever-present fear of self-annihilation, which the fallen ones have sealed by their own envy and enmity with the light. You must place under your feet in submission to the word, even as the woman placed the moon under her feet. For the doubts of these doubters of the truth and of the word and of the joy of the little child are the ever-present disease that would infest the mind and the heart, if it were possible, of the true body of believers. But it cannot. This doubt in the immediacy and the availability of the presence of God to meet every need and resolve every equation, human and divine, has been spun into the manifold philosophies of the shrewd serpent and his seed. And so the way of the world is filled with it. And many people operate in a force field of doubt and fear. And this is understandable because the world is challenging. But let us remember that attunement with the presence, because the presence of God in you is sufficient to the solving of every problem within and without, spiritual, material, divine, mundane. Rosalinda, can we listen to that excerpt from Saint Germain's dictation? This is just about 6 or 7 minutes.
For consciousness is a blessed.
It started. I don't know why it didn't continue. I'm going to try it again.
Okay.
If you want to continue, I'll work on it.
Yeah,
in momentum.
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. go ahead.
Let's see. Maybe this is a good time to take some questions or if there are comments.
Anybody have questions or comments for Patrick?
You know, I think that one of the ideas that comes across to me is that I was raised with kind of the idea of the stiff upper lip, and that whatever happens, you can just suck it in and stand firm and make it through. And there's some benefit to that, but it's what I discovered was that my own capacities were far too limited to achieve the grace that I had a sense existed, and that wasn't always manifesting through me or around me. So if the world and the way of the world.
Hopi in the chat says, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
What's that?
I was just going to say, Hopi in the chat said, thank you, Reverend Patrick, really inspiring. Just a closer walk with thee comes to mind to hone God mastery and control.
All right.
And Patrick, I think I have it now. If you'd like me to share.
Oh, excellent. For my beloved Saint Germain.
Oh, no. The best laid plans, Patrick.
Okay, listen, thanks. I sent that over to you without a huge amount of time to figure out the tech on it. So I appreciate your willingness to work on it, Rosalinda. So I guess the main point I wanted to get across today is that seeing and unseeing is an exercise of what you're willing to live with. We know that with our beloved Saint Germain is willing to help us when we do our alchemy, which is the creation of the world we wish to live in, and the creation of the gifts that we would like to give the world to experience. That he's willing to help us. And this is the very nature of the masters working with us. They take us where we are, and they help us to go higher and farther and faster and more surely and beautifully than we would on our own.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi Patrick, it's James Scully.
Hey, James.
I was reminded of a teaching Mother Mary gave. I can't find the exact quote, or not the quote, but also the source or the time and date. But basically, I think it was back in like first few years of the activity. She gave us a teaching that we could actually make it's a visualization, then a call we can make. The visualization is to look in the mirror in the morning when you get up, see our eyes as luminous orbs and past perceptions of imperfection. I thought that's just a great key along with this whole topic of the immaculate concept for ourselves and others. And I'm just reminded to pick it up and start doing it again. I used to do it years ago. And it's the same with the one you gave earlier about the Elohim of peace, show forth your light. That's a great one too. And so all these little keys we need to codify and share with each other as we can. And that helps us to hold the immaculate concept for ourselves and others and strengthen the bonds of community. So all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. And Saint Germain mentioned also
Thanks,
taught that in
James.
the
I love
30s.
that
You can
too.
look into the mirror and you say to that which you see there, I am the radiant expression of divine grace. And then you can actually look that up in the Magic Presence. And the teaching is very beautiful. The point being that I am the power that radiates through these eyes, and I send this radiant blessing into everything into which I look.
That's great.
Yeah. We got a question in the chat, Patrick. Rebecca would like to know, does always keeping quiet to avoid confrontation help keep the peace?
You know, I missed that. So say again for me. So just didn't hear it.
Does always keeping quiet to avoid confrontation help keep the peace?
Oh, always keeping quiet. Well, I guess the way Saint Germain said is that when you run into conflict, then still the self. It may be necessary to interact with conflict. But the question then is how can we grow in our capacity to tolerate conflict and discomfort, chaos and confusion, and then stay stable where we are. So I think that it's important not to argue and get into those kinds of things because they don't go anywhere. But sometimes we also have to speak the truth and share something with someone. And if you're a counseling position, then my guess is that for their for their money, that they probably wanted something more than just silence.
Okay.
But it is true that a chaos met with peace will be consumed, because peace isn't just falling asleep under a tree. It can be wielding the sword of peace. And the Elohim Peace addressed that in a dictation in Hawaii back in 1976, I guess it was. She told people to get out of their trees and do something good for the world.
Could I share something?
Sure.
Well, your memory is unbelievable. It's all those things that you could quote, my gosh. But anyway, I had this afternoon, I was working with a book study on Mitra's book study on it. And what really stood out for the whole actually lesson was the study was the need to have compassion and love. And so it seems like the challenge is that when we are dealing with situations that are pretty tough at times, that we are coming from a place of understanding and compassion and not anger and directing at that person something that is not Christ-like. And it's a real mastery. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do, but with practice and in conscious awareness and desire to be the vessel of kindness and not just letting things happen, because that's in a way very harmful, not only to yourself or to the situation and the outcomes and everything. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you. You know, I have to say I get a great deal of comfort from a passage that Lord Maitreya shared with us from Minneapolis back in 76, 74 maybe. But he said, "Call to me in the consciousness of the cosmic Christ, that I might provide the complement to whatever level of consciousness mankind have attained." So there have been few days when I haven't made the call in the morning. Beloved Lord Maitreya, I'm calling to you in the consciousness of the cosmic Christ, that I might provide the complement to whatever level of consciousness mankind, and then I add in the evolutions of Terra, have attained. And that's because I like elementals and things. He said that you will always know what to say, even if it is silence. And I remember right after I went to, I was living in Los Angeles, and I went to Minneapolis for the conference, and then we came back, and I had a job in security in a hospital. So I was going up and down this one long hall, and then it teed off another cross hall, and there was another fellow who was walking up and down that hall. So we kind of just saw each other every once in a while as we went up and down. And it was and I kind of had this idea. I said, gee, I wonder if beloved Lord Maitreya, and I made the call, and then I thought every once in a while we would get kind of close to each other, and I never had a sense of what to say. And so pretty soon I was getting all kind of uptight, and I was saying, beloved Lord Maitreya, how am I going to say, I need to know what to say. And that's, again, we finally got up to the point where we're close to each other, and the guy turned to me and he said, I can tell you're a man of spirit because you're so peaceful. So if I'd opened up my jaw, I would have been in trouble. So beloved Lord Maitreya and the masters will help us. I thought the one thing I wanted especially to share from the teachings in the Corona class lessons was that the physical senses are all the same, meaning that they are vehicles for our spiritual communion and attunement and mastery in the earth, and that they are the vehicles through which we can perceive the spirit even while we are here. Now, there's this whole concept about spirit is of the spirit and the material is of the material, and I understand that. But the senses are the instruments that the Spirit uses to discern reality, to discern good from evil. And this is a spiritual function that is occurring in the physical plane. So sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch, these are all blessed vehicles that we can use to navigate spiritually and successfully and gracefully on the earth.
You, Patrick.
And therefore, what we perceive is not just passive. We participate in the process of perception. And the I am presence in the Christ self and the soul working through the four lower bodies and the five senses can discern reality and the spiritual path. Amen.
Amen.
I have a question.
Yes, Viola.
What could that be, Viola?
Yes. Could you repeat that statement that you made to Maitreya? Could you repeat the
repeat it?
statement? Yes.
Yeah, sure. Beloved Lord Maitreya, I am calling to you in the consciousness of the cosmic Christ, that I might provide the complement to whatever level of consciousness mankind have attained.
Could I
Okay.
share? Thank you.
Okay?
I'd like to share a quote from which relates very much to what you've been saying, Patrick, from The Fallen Angels Among Us, which we're studying as a book study.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And it says here one of the chapters on duality. If we see our life as evil, it will become so. If we see our life as good, it will become so. As we know, as we think in our hearts, so we are. So let us then recognize this and no longer be a victim of our mental states. When mental states come, recognize that the tempter uses many forms. We are not concerned with the tempter. We are concerned with God and God liberation. This is under the chapter, the section, Mark Prophet, teaching how we can step out of the world of duality, So which really is, if we stay in the consciousness of God and our I am presence and live in that, then that's one way of getting out of duality. And even though we are in the world where there is distress and all that, if we keep our consciousness there, and then we will be able to deal in peace, as you just said, Patrick, in peace with the problems, if we just keep that strongly anchored in that state of higher consciousness, and then we step out of duality.
Thank you, Joy.
You're welcome.
Well, it looks to me like it's 6:30.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, any other closing comments? If
Yes.
Irene.
I was
Hi,
just,
Irene.
hi, Patrick. Hey, I was wondering with all of what's going on in the news these days, it's so dire and black. I'm just wondering, do you ever limit yourself to how much news you watch? Because it just seems like it just sucks you in. You want to, it's almost addictive.
Well, if I find that if I find that something upsets me, then I stop.
Yeah.
And I take care of that until I'm not upset anymore. Now, I recently read a book by some missionaries who were sent to Czechoslovakia and arrived about 4 days before Hitler invaded. And there was a very, very difficult time, and it was filled with tragedy of every possible kind. So it was a sad and a gripping story. And I know that such stories are not rare in the history of the earth, and they may or may not be rare in the days and months and years to come and generations to come. But I am convinced, and I, I don't know what the steps are between here and there, but I am convinced that we will have a new American Renaissance and we will have a golden age.
Right.
So I am determined, God help me, but I'm determined to make sure that if I'm contributing, it's towards the golden age and it's towards the American Renaissance. And it's a great blessing and relief for me to know that the judgment call is always unto the resurrection and the life of the light bearers.
Yeah.
And that the judgment is not mine, the judgment is the Lord's.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, everyone. This is a great session by Patrick. I hope you got some good keys for unseeing and seeing what we want to see and not seeing what we don't want to see, and how to deal with what we do see that is not comfortable, but is upsetting. So take time out, get centered again, put it in the flame, do your judgment calls, and then come back to it when you can do so in love and in peace and in harmony. So next month on the 21st, we are going to have Michael Seegers with us, who is going to share with us some Pohatic keys to help us become more effective spiritual warriors. I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Patrick, for a great presentation. God bless you all. We love you all.